Hey everyone, the recent Speed Chess Championship just finished and former world champion Magnus Carlsen won the event quite convincingly after beating Alireza Firouzja in the finals. But the most exciting matchup in this event was in the semi-finals where Magnus Carlsen faced American Grandmaster Hans Niemann. So just in case, let me tell you that there was a big controversy between these two players. Back in 2022, at the Sinquefield Cup, Carlsen withdrew from the tournament after losing to Hans Niemann. He first hinted that Niemann was cheating, he later confirmed this, and a few weeks later they met online and Carlsen resigned on the second move of their game.
This is his main move, d4, knight f6, c4, yeah. And what?
What?
No, what happened?
Magnus Carlsen just resigned, got up and left, switched off his camera, and that's all we know right now.
So Carlsen was definitely trying to avoid Niemann at any cost, but in this knockout event, Carlsen was not lucky and Niemann managed to reach the semifinals. So this is a very exciting event because we have 3 different time controls that are very quick, blitz and bullet. The games can get very exciting, and even though the match was fairly one-sided, there were a lot of exciting moments that I want to focus on. So let's start with the very first game. In this position, Niemann managed to win an exchange, even though White has 2 very strong bishops. Black is a full exchange up, so Black should be the one trying to press here. Black can play pretty much any move like a4, trying to fix this pawn. But Niemann wanted to be more direct and started pushing the b-pawn, trying to create a pass pawn. So out of nowhere, here comes the move knight to d2, and suddenly this rook on b3 is going to be trapped. So White is going to get the exchange back and even get a much better position thanks to these 2 very strong bishops. This bishop on h7 is also not very active. So Carlsen managed to win this game in just a few moves, so this was already a very important psychological edge for Magnus that he kept throughout the match. In the third game here, Magnus scored an amazing victory. Even though the time control is very quick, here Magnus played an amazing game. In this position, Black is threatening ideas like knight to d3, forking the 2 rooks, or the pawn a2. So here Magnus played the move knight to f4. He doesn't care about the pawn a2, and this knight is going to be a very strong attacking piece. So here after knight takes a2, Magnus didn't care about moving the rook on c1, he played a very nice knight to h5, just bringing more pieces to attack Black's king. So these 3 pieces are going to be very powerful to attack Black's king. Bishop to f6 is already a big threat, so Black is in no time to take the rook. After bishop to f6, planning to take on g7 is just going to be game over. For example, after rook to g8, bishop takes, and queen takes, we get a checkmate. So Niemann tried rook to g8, but this king already feels quite weak there. Magnus played the very nice knight to f6, again bringing the knight forward. Black cannot take because after bishop takes, we're gonna get a quick checkmate. Niemann tried queen to f8. Magnus doesn't want to take the rook, just to keep on attacking. Queen to h5. Here Niemann tried taking the knight, and after bishop takes and rook to g7, this rook is pinned, so White doesn't need to hurry. And here Carlsen took on c6, just winning more material. And after knight to c4, Niemann resigned, but in any case, the position is desperate. Black has a weak king, and White still has ideas to attack, for example, rook to c7, planning to put pressure on f7. Now let's move on to the 5th game, where Niemann managed to score a win. Here in this position, he played the very interesting move bishop to c8, inviting White to make a mistake, to take on f6. So here White is a pawn up, but Black has some counterplay, particularly on the first rank. Also the pawn on c3 is being attacked, but here a move like rook to a1 will give White a very safe position. But instead, Magnus took on f6, and after rook to c1, pinning the bishop and planning ideas like bishop to h3 and king to g2, here he missed this very nice move, rook takes f1. And in the game, Magnus took on h6, and then after rook f to e1, White gets 3 pawns for the piece, but Black has ideas to attack the king and won the game. But the main idea of this sacrifice is that after king takes f1, Black gets a very nice checkmate after bishop to h3 and rook to e1. Now let's analyze another very nice win by Niemann. on the 10th game. Here white is an exchange up, but white has to be careful because black has some pressure on white's pawns. The knight on c5 is very nicely placed, and even though white is trying to attack, after rook to h8, the king can escape to g6. So here Niemann played the best move, which is the move h5, so trying to cover the escape square for the king after h5. Now rook to h8 is going to give a checkmate, and here Magnus tried g6, which as we see is going to fail because black's king is going to run out of squares. But the point is that after queen takes h5, now white is going to win material after rook to h8, king to g6, queen to e8. Now we give a check. If the king moves, we're going to collect the queen, and after rook to f7 and rook to f8, black's position is falling apart. So instead Magnus tried g6, but now after rook to h8 and king to g7, the king is still very weak on g7 because here Niemann brought another piece to the attack, rook b to b8, and after queen takes, white gave a check on g8, and in this position Carlsen resigned, not waiting for king to f7 and queen to e8, giving a checkmate. Now let's move on to one of the most exciting positions from the match. Here we have this crazy position where Magnus sacrificed a piece for 2 pawns. This knight on e6 looks very attractive, but if black manages to consolidate, black's extra piece should count, and black also has some strong pressure on g2. So here Magnus cannot take on e7 without getting a checkmate. Having this idea in mind, here he played the very nice rook to a6 with the idea to deflect this bishop. So if black takes on a6, then white will take on e7, planning to give a checkmate on g7. So here Niemann played queen to d7, and now Magnus went rook to b6, trying to bring more pieces and attack the bishop. And here Niemann played the move bishop to c6, which turned out to be a decisive mistake. Bishop to d5, attacking this very strong knight, was a much better alternative. But after bishop to c6, Magnus missed a very strong continuation, which is to take this bishop on c6. So amazingly, black's pieces are overloaded in this position. If the queen takes on c6, then queen takes e7, wins material. Or after rook takes c6, black has problems on the back rank. After rook to e8, the king is being attacked. King to h7 would lead to a checkmate after queen to h5. If rook to e8, then white will simply trade on e8 and then take on g7, giving a checkmate. Or after rook to c8, white will trade and then take on e7. So here white has 2 extra pawns, and also queen takes g7 is coming. But instead Magnus played rook a to a6, which was still good enough. After knight to f4, now he found the idea, rook takes e6, and after rook takes, here rook to e8, similar to what we've seen, was decisive. Instead he took on c6, and here Niemann took on e6 with the knight. Here he had a very nice move to even get an advantage, rook takes e6, and then after f takes e6, take the rook on c6. Instead he took on e6 with the knight, but after f takes e6, if the queen takes on c6, white will again capture e7, and after queen takes, Niemann is trying to survive, but now Magnus took on c4, again taking advantage of the fact that the queen is overloaded. After queen takes and queen takes e7, we get an ending where Magnus has 2 extra pawns. He didn't have any troubles to convert this and actually many other endings throughout the match. Now let's move on to the bullet section, where the players had 1 minute plus 1 second per move for the whole game. In this position, Magnus has a clear pawn up, a very strong knight on d5. So here a move like b3 was good. Magnus gets an advantage here, but let me ask you, how did Magnus finish the game in just 1 move here? So let me know in the comments which is the strongest move for white in this position. Now the next game is a perfect example of the crystal clear style that Magnus has. In this position, white has an advantage because black's pieces are actually very clumsy, but to make things worse here, Niemann took on g3, just helping white activate this rook on a3, which was not doing a lot there. So after rook takes, now this rook is going to be very powerful, and amazingly the game is just pretty much over. After the queen moves, knight to f4 is a very nice maneuver, the knight is coming to h5, and this bishop on g7 is going to be captured. So here Niemann went queen to h4, and after knight to h5, he resigned. White is going to collect this knight on g7, but in any case after something like rook f to d8, knight to h5, and bishop to f8. Black's position looks depressing. White has many ways to continue, like queen to f3 or even king to h1 and bring another rook to the g file. And before I move on to the last position, if you want to seriously get better at chess, I have a free course that will provide you with a training plan for that, so feel free to check the link in the description. So in the last games, in the bullet section, Niemann managed to win the last games, and he played some very nice games like the last one. Here in this position, white is a pawn up, the queen on a6 looks quite misplaced, so white has an advantage, but Magnus is a very strong player, and here he tried to complicate the game after taking on b4, c takes b4, and bishop takes. So Magnus got the pawn back, bishop takes b5 might be an idea, but here Niemann played the very nice knight takes c7, and after rook takes and bishop takes, we got this trade of a knight and a bishop for a rook and a pawn, but his idea was to follow up with the very strong move b5, just disconnecting the bishop from the queen, and after queen to a5, rook e to c1 is pinning this bishop. Magnus tried queen to b4, so Niemann's idea of taking on c7 was actually very strong. Here the move queen to e2, just pinning the bishop, would have been decisive, because white is going to collect the bishop and get a decisive material advantage. Instead here he played a similar idea, queen to d5, but this was actually a bad move because here Magnus had the very pretty queen to e1, just sacrificing the queen, but after rook takes, now black can take the queen on d5, and black actually has a better position here. These two bishops are stronger than a rook. White's rooks don't have a way to get into black's position. But Magnus missed this idea. With a few seconds on the clock, this might be difficult to spot, and here he played king to b8, and after queen takes e4, now Niemann gets an extra exchange and a better position, so he won the game in just a few moves. So besides the controversy between these two players, this match did have some exciting moments. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.